Hi, everybody. I'm really missing the garden department right around now, and I thought uh, I might like to answer some questions you might have even before you think of them. I've seen a lot of mistakes made through the years, plenty of them by me. So let's see if we could do something to avoid some problems, okay? First thing, plant the right plant in the right place. Think about the size that it will eventually become, about what zone we are in and what zone the plant is hardy for, and the location. For example, take a look at that picture on the far left. You've probably seen things similar to that before. I think there's a picture window back there. Kind of hard to say. I see some steps, barely. There are plants like the emerald green arborvitae that will only grow 12 to 15 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide, depending on who's writing the tag and their experience of it. I still would suggest planting it both of those a little farther away from like toward the corner of the house. The picture on the right is just a family favorite of ours. On Route 10 somewhere, heading off toward Lincoln, Illinois, where my kids went to college. We just thought it looked like a bunny rabbit, so we enjoyed watching for that as we passed by. That's an example of a tree that had to be cut or trimmed because of power lines. And I'm sure you've all seen similar things. We are in Zone 5. The USDA, Department of Agriculture, has come up with the zones to indicate how the cold hardiness of plants. Actually, there's also a map because some plants can't handle real hot weather, but the plants for us will show Zone 5, meaning it can resist or withstand temperatures down to maybe 20 below zero. You'll see the northern part of Indiana and Illinois, Zone 5. If you look on a plant tag, like this one is from the Hydrangea macrophylla, it says it's hardy in zone 5 to 9. It'll also show you that the size, 2 to 3 feet tall. This one actually has a very descriptive tag. It'll show you how to plant it, what kind of moisture it needs and everything. Hydrangea macrophylla was not normally hardy in our area. So to see one that says it's hardy to zone 5 is really nice. Don't plant your annuals too early. That includes things like tomatoes and peppers. Tomatoes and peppers won't even do much until the weather gets warm, and then they'll really take off and kind of make up for lost time. This is damage on frost damage on a tomato plant. And a little bit of frost damage like that might not hurt anything, but it could discourage the plant from doing well all season long. Our frost-free date around here is sometimes shown as May 5th through 10th. Sometimes you'll see it through 15th. Basically, think of Mother's Day, and because every season is going to be a little different depending on our how the winter was. Some people recommend waiting until Memorial Day for some things, and Memorial Day is a very popular planting day. You can cover heat-loving or you could cover plants, but you are taking a chance if we should get a late frost. The zone matters because some things just are not hardy in our area. For example, the dahlias in the bottom left are tubers, and they have to be dug up in the fall if you want to save them for the following year. You can do that. You could dig them up and store them over winter. The purple fountain grass, it's very, very popular. I love it, but it's only hardy in zone 7 through 9. And sometimes I'll see customers buying several of them, and they're planning on planting them outside in their landscape and then are disappointed to find out that it's not going to come back next year. Nico Blue hydrangea, for so many years, that was the only hydrangea of that type, a hydrangea macrophylla, that you would see in our area. But so many times customers would say to me, I have this beautiful plant, but I never get any flowers. And the reason for that is because Nico Blue is not hardy in our area. And so basically winter would prune it for you at the wrong time, and you would get a wonderful plant. The plant would survive, but the flower buds at the ends of the twigs would not. Location, sun, shade, partial sun, partial shade in between, wet or dry. Fox Hosta Farm in the upper corner, beautiful place to plant hostas because of all those trees. Anderson Japanese Gardens, that place actually was beautiful. I've been there, beautiful. even when it's not in bloom. So many contrasting colors and textures. Sometimes things will handle shade better than you think, or handle sun better than you think, depending on how much sun and how much shade you get, and depending on whether they're getting watered or whether they're have something over them, a little bit of shelter. Foliage. I am a huge fan of foliage. Customers are often disappointed to find out that perennials do not bloom all season long. If you come to a garden center in the spring, you're going to find things that bloom in the spring. And if you just come shopping at that one time, a lot of your flowers will be done within a few weeks. And it's good to shop at garden centers all season long. I recommend it. But also look for things that will bloom at different times, and look for things that have beautiful foliage otherwise. That top middle is an ornamental grass called Heconicloa coneycloa, just say Japanese forest grass. But it's got that beautiful texture, and that yellow color just pops in the shade. If it's given a little bit of sun, it'll do well in the shade though, but give it a little bit of sun and it's just awesome. To the right, top right, a heuchera called cherry truffles. And actually in the opposite corner is an assortment of heuchera leaves. Not all on one plant, unfortunately. But heucheras are grown simply for their foliage. Beautiful foliage, beautiful colors. The flowers really are, you don't even notice them sometimes. They're very spiky and spindly. The lower right is a coleus. And a lot of you think of it as well, you should, one of the most popular plants for growing in the shade. But the breeders are coming up with such beautiful combinations and colors and textures. Again, I love the edges on that one. This one is from a new series from the Penn State Trial Gardens. The series is called Main Street. That one's called Rodeo Drive. I just love that one. Now the middle plant is a spirea. It's called candy corn. It grows maybe 2 to 3 feet tall, which again, the breeders are trying to come up with things in smaller sizes. But this one, a good example of flowers that only last for a few weeks, as they do on perennials and shrubs, flowering shrubs, they'll only last for a few weeks. But then you've got that beautiful foliage. If you buy a shrub or a tree and you open it up, the pot, and it looks like this, which often will happen, especially if you get a really good deal at the end of the season. That's from sitting in the pot too long. You can take your hands and just claw into it. You can take a knife and cut that up, or use, like I have a little 3-prong cultivator you see there, which is like an old friend of mine. I've had that same little thing for maybe 30, 40 years. And just hack away at those roots. Disturbing the roots like that encourages new roots to grow, and will also encourage that plant to reach out into the soil around it. As with container plants or balled and burlap plants, plant them at the same level that they are already in the container or the pot, unless you are planting in clay soil. If you're planting in clay, it's recommended that you plant up a little higher. And actually, in all cases, in regular soil or non-clay soil, just dig your hole the same depth as the plant is already at now. You don't need to dig deeper. Digging deeper might encourage the plant to settle too deep. Once it's been in place for a while, it'll settle in place. So just leave undisturbed soil at the bottom. If you're planting in clay, you could have that sticking up a little higher, maybe even a third of it sticking up out of the soil. But dig your hole like twice as wide, maybe 3 times as wide, because the plants will root out sideways. Especially with trees. A lot of people think trees have big tap roots, and they don't. Most of the roots are closer to the surface. If you're planting in clay and you want to amend the soil, the best options are probably anything organic. You can never go wrong with anything organic. Sphagnum moss, compost, manure. You can buy things at the store, or if you have a friendly horse owner, you can get those there. You mix it in with the soil. You don't add it in by itself. The plant needs to gradually get accustomed to the clay that is all around it. And if you put real rich soil in one place like that and leave it, you'll basically be creating like a bathtub. They call it the bathtub effect, where the water all just sits there. Okay, research the plant. That calorie pear on the right, one of my favorite trees. I've recommended it for a long time, and alas, no longer. You might not be able to find it this year. They were allowing growers to continue selling it for a while, but it has become a problem child. And Rose of Sharon can be a problem because it seeds so very prolifically. You'll find seedlings of it popping up everywhere. If anybody offers you a plant of any kind and says, here, I've got this growing all over my yard, you could have some, just say no, thank you. So here are a few plants, for example, that are problems. English ivy on the top left. I took a cutting of it when I did a landscaping job several years ago and planted it on the side of my garage. And next thing you know, it was all creeping into my perennial bed and up over the side of the garage, under the roof of the garage. We took care of him in a hurry. Japanese lantern, I hope you can't find that anywhere. Another very pretty plant, but it's just a terrible plant as far as reseeding. The ditch lilies, I do want to mention ditch lilies because they are a daylily of a type of daylily, Hemerocallis fulva. Daylilies are not actually in the lily family at all. They are Hemerocallis is the family name, but Hemerocallis fulva spreads by underground runners and stolons, and it will pop up everywhere. So it has the common name ditch lilies. Now the hybrid daylilies that you find in garden centers behave so much better. And, but again, they're perennials. They will bloom for a short time unless you get something like the Stella de Oro, which blooms all season long on and off. The ajuga, bottom right, is beautiful ground cover. That particular one is dark scallop, I think it is. And beautiful foliage, little blue flowers in the spring, but I have it growing in my grass, which doesn't bother me. It might bother you if you had that in your yard. Burning bush, bottom in the middle, no longer available for sale. It's an invasive plant. Rose of Sharon, some of them can be invasive, aggressive, shall we say. I don't know. Did I mention invasive and aggressive plants? Sometimes the words are used, misused, interchangeably used. I've done the same thing myself as I did just now. Invasive plants refer to plants that are non-native. So sometimes you don't know whether it's a native plant or not without doing a little bit of research. But invasive plants can become very aggressive. There are some plants that are aggressive. I suppose there are some that are aggressive, but also native, and they're aggressive because they may be spread by seeds. But anyway, they're bullies. But fortunately for us, there are people out there who are developing new hybrids of things that have everything we want. We want it all. We want more color. We want things to bloom longer. We want sizes that fit in our landscape better. We want things to be disease resistant and more hardy. We want it all. So bloomerang pink lilac, for example. Now there's also a bloomerang purple version called bloomerang because, get this, it'll bloom again. It comes back, it blooms again. It'll bloom again throughout the season. Endless summer hydrangea. Remember the Nico blue I was telling you about, not hardy in our area? Endless summer, and there are plenty of other varieties like it that will bloom on new wood as well as old wood. So you don't have to worry about the dead wood dying back and not getting flowers. My Monet Weigela, another favorite of mine because of the foliage. Now, Weigela is a plant that has been around. Maybe your grandmother had one in her yard years ago and it might still be there. Good plant, but pretty much nondescript. Green leaves, rosy pink flowers, and that's about it. But the new hybrids are beautiful. This particular one also only grows about 2 feet tall at the most. And it's got that green and white variegated foliage, which means that when it's done blooming, you still have something there to look at. There is also a My Monet sunset, I think, that has a little bit of an orangey color to it. Pruning flowering shrubs at the right time. I mentioned the terms old wood and new wood. If you prune a lilac, you need to do it right after it's done blooming, because it blooms only blooms on old wood. So the flower buds are being the cells for the flowering bud, or something. It's more scientific than I want to get into right now, but it's actually setting the cells for the flower buds already within a short time after blooming. Some shrubs will bloom on new wood, like spireas, for example. Even if you cut them back, they'll still bloom that season. Some shrubs will bloom on old wood and new wood, like those newer hydrangeas that I was talking about. Let's talk a little bit about weed prevention. Basically, if you're trying to take care of weeds, it's important to know, well, you could tell right away, is it a grassy weed or a broadleaf weed? And most weeds are categorized pretty much in those two categories. There are sedges and other things, but let's just stick to grassy and broadleaf at the moment, okay? So grassy weeds, like crabgrass in your lawn, are treated by preventive. So you need to apply that early if you're going to use that, which would be like right around now. We're talking late April, mid-April, depending on the season, because depending on how our winter was, will make a difference on when crabgrass starts to germinate. Broadleaf weeds are treated or killed, controlled after they're up and growing. And again, always read the package labels because they will tell you when to apply things like weed control or insect control, whatever. You could also put a lot of mulch down to control weeds. But what about weed block? Yes, let's talk about weed block. I'm not a fan. I am not a fan. I've seen this way too many times. That weed block on the right side, that photo on the right side is from my house. And I've been in my house 30 years. I don't ever remember using weed fabric, but there it is. And not doing anything good. One other problem, what happens with weed block is you put a layer of mulch over the top of it, or even if you use rock, that might be a little bit better. But you can see in that top center, not a whole lot better. When you put a layer of fabric down, and then put mulch on top, that mulch winds up decomposing and creates basically a nice new fertile layer of soil, which is perfect for growing new weeds. And that's what happens. Now, the weeds that grow up on top of landscape fabric are usually easy to pull. They're very shallow rooted. The other thing to notice, though, is if you use weed block, you have to make sure that whatever you're putting the weed block on top of is already dead. Not just mostly dead, but dead. Because otherwise it'll poke up right through that weed block fabric. In this case, if you do have a layer of mulch on top of fabric, or just a layer of mulch, a pre-emergent would be good in that case. You can also plant things very closely because nature abhors a vacuum. So if you plant very closely, you don't leave room for weeds. The ground cover in the bottom left is sweet woodruff, one of my favorite little whorls of flowers. I have some in my yard, and getting ready to bloom right about now. And that'll fill up spaces, which is what you want it to do. Okay, this is an interesting. Now, this is a picture. This is from my own backyard, and on the right you'll see before and after pictures. Before I pulled weeds and after I pulled them. On that far right, that's what it's supposed to look like. Now, right now I have a brandywine viburnum that I planted just last year that will eventually fill up some of that space. But that's the spot I forgot to use the pre-emergent, and it shows. Those weeds came out very quickly, like I said, very shallow rooted, but I could tell right away I had not used pre-emergent in that area. The very far left is what my garden looks like pretty much on a good day, I would say. That rose bush, by the way, is William Baffin, a shrub climber from the Canadian Explorer series. very hardy in our area. It's one of those roses that blooms only one time, but I've had that rose bush there about 25 years. So this is my confession time. Do you see how close I planted that to the garage? A very, definitely a rookie mistake. I figured it's a climber, right? But it's really like more of a shrub climber. The funny thing, and don't tell anybody I said this, a couple of years ago, I noticed a tomato cage over there. Like I thought maybe the tomato cage was going to be support for that young plant, right? It's very funny. But that rose bush is doing awesome after all these years. Okay, do you need 4 steps to fertilize your lawn? Do you need to fertilize 4 times a year? In a quick answer, I would say no. The best time to fertilize your lawn is in the fall. Let's say November, maybe October or September. Think of your lawn as, the lawns go dormant in the wintertime. So think of it like a hibernating bear storing food for the winter. If you put down your fertilizer in the fall, it will take all that down and develop roots, develop the root system for overwinter. If you choose to use fertilizer other times during the year, you know that there's a lot of companies that have the 4-step program. So the first step always has pre-emergent added to it because, like I said, the grassy weeds are treated as a preventive. Crabgrass is an annual. It will die at the end of the year. So if you forget one year, don't worry about it. But that's why it has to be put on early. You'll see bags of fertilizer with pre-emergent for crabgrass for sale right around now, or this is the end of April here. You have to wait at least 6 weeks between using fertilizer steps so that you don't burn your lawn. That's too much nitrogen, and you've got to give some time in between. So let's say 6 weeks in between. And then the second step would have broadleaf weed control added to it, which is when you see the dandelions. There's also another reason why you would want to wait closer to in May for broadleaf weed control, and that's because more of them are up and growing. If you put broadleaf weed control on now, and there are dandelions in the yard right now, like I said, what was the 29th or 30th of April that I'm doing this, there will be dandelions, and if we have warm enough weather, yes, you might kill them, but there will be more to come because broadleaf weed control kills what it touches. And you need to, if it's a granular product, you need to apply it while the grass is wet so it sticks to the leaves and then kills them. Third step, if you decide to use that again, insect control is often added to that. Fourth step in the fall. One simple way to remember this, when to use the 4 steps, would be to think of the holidays: Easter, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. Now that, like I said, it's a quick way to remember, a little mnemonic, so to speak, but every year is a little different depending on what kind of winter we've had and that kind of thing, and what kind of summer we're having. You won't want to apply fertilizer if we're going through a drought, that kind of thing. Okay. Also, don't overwater, don't overfertilize. Sometimes you could cause problems that way. Overfertilizing might encourage disease. Overwatering could make your lawn like a spoiled child. And I say overwatering, if you have a sprinkler system and you're using it every day for a few minutes, the root zone on your grass will not be very deep. It will be like a spoiled child. And then if we go through a drought or if your water system breaks, your soil will not have the resources it needs to go any deeper. Okay, this is something fun I like to do. Can you tell by looking at those 4 pictures what lawn issue we are working with right now? Are those insect problems, grub problems? Can you identify which one? And I need the Jeopardy music right now. There we go. My point is, because I can't tell them either without identifying, I'm not a lawn expert, but my point is you don't want to apply something if you don't know what you're dealing with. There's no sense applying grub control if you don't have grubs. And some of these other issues sometimes are seasonal, sometimes they're they're affected by too much watering, too much fertilizer, not enough fertilizer. So know what you're dealing with. There are websites, and we will be attaching some Purdue publications to this, the description on this video that you can use for some of these problems. Don't overuse chemicals just because, first of all, I'm trying to save you some money here, but also we don't want to hurt the beneficial insects. There are a lot of good insects out there that eat the bad insects, the ones that are hurting your plants and your flowers. So you want to know what you're dealing with and only treat that one problem. The picture of me in the corner, I was at a winery in California a few years ago with my sisters. Fields of lavender. You could smell it in the air and you could hear the bees in the air. The air was thick with the sound of bees. I'll never forget that. And did they bother us? No, because they had all that lavender and that's what they were there for. It's awesome. Okay, just to save a little bit of time, create a mowing strip along the edge of your landscaping. If you use what's what we call a dug edge, you take a shovel, dig in there, fill it up with some mulch, and avoid, because a lot of times the plastic landscape edging you put in there or whatever winds up popping up out of the ground. It causes actually more trouble than it's worth sometimes. So make a mowing strip, make it with a nice gentle curve so that your lawnmower can get around it and you could actually ride up right over the edge of that mulch area and save yourself a lot of trimming. This photo is from one of my Master Gardener friends, Cheryl Lynn. I just thought it was a beautiful photo. She's got a nice dug edge there and nice contrasting colors and textures for this time of year. Monocultures have a couple of different problems. One being if an insect or disease gets on one plant, like in the case of these arborvitaes, it very easily spreads to the next. You can imagine how that works. I'm thinking of the potato famine. I've heard bananas are the same way. Bananas are all the same hybrid, grown all over the world. That was an interesting thing I found out. But the other thing is if something should die, like in the case of these odd arborvitaes here and there, it's hard to replace one. And I have customers often coming into the garden center asking for an arborvitae that is just the right size or shape. And sometimes people don't realize that there are so many different varieties of something that you might plant, let's say, another Weigela to fill in the spot of one, and if it's a different variety, it's going to look a little mismatched. This is just for fun because I'm a real fan of landscaping and texture. The far right is a mistake I made in my yard. You look at that plant and you think, why is it blooming only on one side there? Well, that's actually two plants, but the texture of the foliage is so similar and they're planted so close together that you would think it was one plant. We've got a mock orange there and a lilac, I think it's Miss Kim, planted right next to it. So I gave some examples. Boxwood on the top left, and right next to it, Emerald Gaiety, euonymus, which again is going to be one of those plants you won't find in garden centers anymore. But the foliage on those, both rounded and small, very similar, the only difference being the color. And so not a lot of contrast there. On the bottom left, you've got, I think it's Goldie arborvitae and also a false cypress, Chamaecyparis piscifera. I love that I can say that word. And just too close in looks to make your landscape look good. That's just my opinion here, just my opinion. Okay, think of drainage and runoff. Do you like my photos here, my drawings? This is a side view. So those little round things are shrubs, let's say. And when rain falls, you don't want to have that area where it's going to slide right off down into the house. Need to make sure it slopes a little bit more down like that away from your house. You can also create a rain garden to divert rain from your house, and we will include links to a publication on that as well. Rain gardens are fun to do. The landscape, the little island over there in the street, suppose it's possible that those are porous pavers, but I don't know for sure. Usually when I see something like that, I suspect that, and I have seen those trees be replaced many times in the years I've lived in this area. but those trees have no access to any moisture other than what they're getting right through that little 2-foot hole. What about these floral plants? Anytime you see floral wrap like this, think of it as a florist item. Those are beautiful hydrangeas. The other day I had customers who were getting ready to buy one, and I noticed the flowers were kind of not looking the best. So I thought, well, are they buying it for a gift? No, they were planning on putting it into the ground. They were going to plant it in their landscape. Remember I mentioned to you the Nico blue hydrangea and all the newer varieties? We don't even know what this variety is. This one is intended to be given as a gift, or, well, it's got the floral wrap on it, so it tells me it's a florist gift. We don't know what variety it is. We don't know how hardy it is. It's possible if you put that in your yard, you might even get leaves. You might get it toward the end of the summer still looking good, but we have no idea what it's going to do after that. These are also grown for the floral industry more so, and they are not concentrating on root growth or anything like that. So look for the varieties intended for landscaping. Hanging baskets dry out very, very quickly. And sometimes when you have that many plants packed into a pot, they will also get root bound. Like that container shrub we were looking at a little while ago. There will be so many roots in that pot that you could water it and the water will flow right over the top. Not to mention the fact that a hanging basket will dry out quickly just because it's hanging. We call that hydrophobic. It's like they're afraid of water. No, they're actually just resisting water. If that happens, you could take that plant and submerge the entire thing in water for half an hour, and let it get really, really, really wet, But then keep in mind, you're going to have to make sure you don't let it dry out again. Because again, there's so many roots in the pot by the end of, let's say, July, that it's going to dry out very quickly. This is something I've been seeing a lot lately as a trend. Lots of plants in little containers, and that really looks pretty. But again, think about how you're going to water that if you decide to do something like that. Anytime you have something hanging or in a container above ground, it's going to dry out faster. People ask me, will this live all winter long? Now, this picture was taken in Chicago. It's very possible that whoever does the landscaping for the city it's very possible they're just going to take those boxwoods out and keep them somewhere for the winter, because my guess is they won't stay. Now, it's, like I said, boxwoods are a little hardier than they used to be. About 30 years ago, it was really uncommon to see boxwood in our area. It's more of a southern thing, but the breeders are coming up with newer varieties that are more hardy. But even still, container, it's above ground, and you have to think about how big the pot is. Is it big enough to have enough insulation around the root ball of that of those little boxwoods? Pansies really like cold weather. That's why you start seeing them in the garden centers in April and sometimes again in the fall. They don't do as well in the summer. They kind of flag a little bit. If you can keep those pansies partially shaded and keep them watered and give them a haircut now and then, they'll bloom again for you in the fall. And well, I've enjoyed this. We are going to include some links to Purdue Publications on the bottom. Master gardeners at Purdue are always happy to help you